Today we have as our panelists, I'm going to do this in alphabetical order. Hannah Coe is pastor of families and faith formation at First Baptist Church in Jefferson City, Missouri. And Kyle Damron is the associate pastor of music and worship at Kirkwood Baptist Church in St. Louis, the St. Louis metro area. And then Lois Kelley is on. She is pastor of Blue Valley Christian Church in Overland Park, Kansas, which is part of the Kansas City metro area. I want to thank you all for joining us today. And I think I'll just go, as we answer some of these questions, I'll just go in that order. We'll start with Hannah and then go to Kyle and then go to Lois, if that's okay, just to keep it simple. Kind of the first question I wanted to start off with, in thinking about congregational ministry in this very unique time we're in, is just for you to tell us the nature of your ministry, what you typically do, and share how COVID has affected what you typically do, maybe focusing on what the most significant challenge has been since all of this began. So Hannah, tell us about your ministry and how you've been affected.
Yeah, so I work in the areas of adult spiritual formation, and then I work with children and families. So that's sort of the scope of ministry that I'm involved in here, which is, I guess, an interesting window into how the congregation is doing and how different generations are functioning right now. So I think some of the biggest effects that we have experienced from COVID are how we practice presence has changed quite a bit. So we've had to rethink and kind of reimagine how we are present with children and parents and adults, and especially in places of rites of passage like birth or significant surgeries, medical issues, and then even, death and dying. So how are we present with people in those spaces? And then we've had to rethink how we are present with each other for the purposes of spiritual formation. And then also thinking in different ways about how we build relationships. I think other things that I've noticed is that adults who do not have children in the home have more bandwidth than they did prior to COVID and stay at home. And then adults who do have children in the home have zero bandwidth, and their anxiety is high and their morale is low at this point. So we've experienced, I've talked to two different pastors in the last couple of weeks, and they've described families with children as radio silent, or, just completely off the radar. So engagement is very low among people with children for the most part. Another effect has just been in technology. We have significantly increased our use of technology for the purposes of communicating and having meetings and even worshiping together. We're spending more money on technology than we were at the beginning of the year. We're having to kind of reevaluate our capacity in the area of technology and look at our hardware and what kinds of equipment we have available. And now we're thinking about the coming year in terms of technology. So very differently than we were before.
And I know how much that feels comfortable to you. That's really kind of your core competency is technology, right?
Well, so our music pastor is in the absence of an administrator working in the area of building, maintenance, insurance, and legal issues. And I think he feels about as confident in that area as I do in the area of technology. So I'm the least qualified person on planet Earth to train anyone in how to use Zoom. And that is what I'm doing now. Very, very different. So I think that the last thing, just in terms of challenges, the challenge of how we're present with each other, how we use technology, how we think about engagement. I also think a big challenge for churches is that organizations are homeostatic systems. They want to revert back to a state of normalcy or homeostasis. And so now what we're seeing is this huge push to just try and get back to normal. And I actually think that that's going to be a challenge for us in every area during the time of COVID.
Very, very, very good. So Kyle, what about you? Tell us about your ministry area, kind of some big challenges you've seen.
Yeah, Kirkwood's history, heritage is more traditional rather than some of our churches perhaps represented here that have contemporary or blended worship. Historically, this is more of a choral-based ministry, and the use of handbell ensembles for children, youth, and adults, children's choirs, all the way through senior adult singing choirs, and a brass ensemble, a large pipe organ, and piano. So that's what I mean by that when I say traditional. Since the week of March 15th, we've been doing worship virtually online through our YouTube channel, which was already established a year ago for homebound ministry. And choirs haven't met in person. And there may be some churches out there and groups, community courses that have done virtual choirs through that technology. We've not opted to go that route, tried to do that for various reasons. I would say the challenge then has been, how do you create community in these ensembles when you have to be separated? And Zoom has been our format to meet, to gather on Wednesday nights, but we can't sing using this technology because of the timing issues and different bandwidths and et cetera, et cetera. It's just not the right platform to even try to attempt to do that. We've tried to do the doxology, for example, at the end of one meeting, and it was just everyone was, in a different place in the song. So that's been, just a practical challenge there. I've also noticed, as Hannah was saying, that there's been a less engagement as time's gone on. There's Zoom fatigue, especially. I've kind of contributed some of that to summer slump with people having opportunities to travel and other activities. And so I've just looked at it as opportunities to get to know others in the groups who do gather on Zoom. I would say the other challenge is how do we use this? We've been asking ourselves, the technology we have, how do we use it? And we've decided to do a live feed every Sunday morning. And there's some churches that are doing pre-recorded services so that they can produce a service that involves a lot of different persons to read scripture, etc. So that since you can't all gather in the same room, and be able to put some things together like that creatively. We decided back in April that we really wanted to do it in the space at 10:30 during the live feed, as a live feed, so that at least during that hour, we're trying to encourage everyone to engage with us during that time at 10:30, so that we can be doing this together in real time, at least in the space of time. But the convenience factor that people can choose when they want to is there. So the question is, that's been a challenge of how do you connect with community during a time like this as a community in worship when not everyone's gathering. Obviously can't. Those are the big ones right now.
Yeah, so it's just beyond spreading the potential of spreading disease by singing. It really is about maintaining community that brought you together. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Since singing is a super spreader. Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. We've done some recordings outside, which I can talk about later on when we share about opportunities for growth and good things that have come during this time.
Sure. So Lois, tell us about your ministry. Yours is a little bit different, not only because you don't serve in one of our Baptist churches. I came to know your story through Central Seminary, one of our seminary partners. You serve in a Christian church, but it's very unique. So tell us about that and the effect of COVID on you.
Okay. Well, I apologize that my video's not working. But yeah, I'm at Blue Valley Christian Church, which is Disciples of Christ denomination. And they sold their building about 6 years ago now, and tried to decide what was their mission, what were they to do. And so we looked at a lot of different options, and we landed at Silvercrest at Deer Creek, which is an independent and assisted living retirement community. We decided we wanted to be their church, and everything that the church is more than just coming and doing a Sunday morning worship. It's the fellowship, it's the other things, it's the outreach projects, everything that goes along with it. We wanted to be a part of their community. And so we've been meeting there for 4 years now. And there's been quite a few little challenges with this because obviously there's not a lot of technology that they're able to access. A few of them have computers, many don't, and especially in the assisted living part. We do our worship on Facebook Live, and our hope was that the activity directors could set up some iPads and the people could still go to the worship area and watch that or use their computer on the screen, but immediately they were also confined to their rooms, and so they weren't even able to watch that. We've worked real hard not to be us and them. There's a core group that do not live in the facility that are also a part of our church, and so we've worked hard to make it unifying, but sometimes it feels like we're sort of back to us and them, because those that don't live there are able to be on the Facebook Live. They're able to do the Zoom for our Sunday school class and those type of things. But we do remain in contact. It just means a lot of cards through regular mail, phone calls. We've dropped off cookies, individually packaged, different things that just say, we haven't forgotten about you, but that's probably one of the biggest challenges, because for the folks that are living there, they already face depression and loneliness, and now this has just really expanded that, and we can't physically be present. And so trying to reach them, especially it's also a generation that's not going to reach out to say, I need help. So you have to reach out to them and let them know that you're there. So a lot of creating of stuff like Bible studies and things that I now type up and email to the activities director to pass out to them. So a lot more old school type of stuff happening.
That's funny. It feels like we are circling around this idea of community and presence being a challenge in whatever ministry area we're talking about here. So this next question I want to ask each of you is really just a shot in the dark, sort of like, boy, I hope there's some good answers to this. Is there anything good that has come out of this? Something that you've come across, stumbled across, something that you've done within your ministry that, gosh, that's surprising, and it's turned out good for us. Hannah, what do you think in your context?
So what I've noticed is that the circumstances of being in a pandemic have become for many of our folks, while an awful thing, also creating an atmosphere for discernment. And so I think people are thinking more about what really matters to them. And I find that in our church, more of our leaders are saying, this is an interesting time for us to notice what is life-giving and what really matters to us, and to dig down into that. And so I think this is a time of invitation, even though it's a sad time and a time of loss. I think that because some of our adults who do not have children in the home, they do have a different type of bandwidth and openness, that there's more space for conversation and more space for virtual prayer groups and doing some short-term things that before those folks wouldn't have had time for or energy for. I think among some of our adults, there's also more space for thinking and dreaming and planning. I also think that this is really a time that has just accelerated changes that have needed to happen in the church. And while some of those come with a lot of loss, they also can help us sort of refocus and reframe and give us some freedom to let go of things in our different church systems that have been sort of weighing us down. It might provide us some freedom to release those, to say a better yes. And I've heard from families that things were at such a fever pitch in March that it was a relief for them to be quarantined. I've heard that from more than one family, that they were thankful that they had to press the pause button. And so there have been parts of this that have been life-giving, just getting to be with the people in your house more, for those who live with someone else or with a family. And I found it, personally, to be life-giving in some ways. So just new opportunity to really live into our values and our mission, even though it's different than we're used to living into those things.
Right. Great. Kyle, what about you? Things that you've discovered that you didn't expect, maybe?
Sure. And I can say ditto to some of those things Hannah has said that I've discovered, and we've discovered here as a staff and during this time. But with music, well, as we were saying a moment ago, one of the challenges is not being able to sing in person, even if we were to start to gather in person in socially, physically distanced situations. We couldn't necessarily all sing together inside a building without, it being a spreader of the virus. So with that in mind, the opportunity to sing, we've done some virtual hymn sings on average once a month since March, that I and a very accomplished accompanist, pianist, put together. And I've imagined that whether people are singing at home, singing full out, or humming along, that's been a ministry to them. The choir had a night on Zoom where they muted themselves, as many of you are muted here, and one of our choir members is a retired vocal teacher here at Missouri Baptist University, and she offered us vocal lessons of how we can keep our voices strong and, manage, not get them out, let them get out of shape with the breathing and the whole mechanism, your body, that the lungs and your everything that you have to engage to sing properly as a choral singer. I've also discovered that the Zoom meetings have actually allowed time to actually get to know each other and to learn about choir members. who I may not have ever learned something, the things I've learned about them, and others wouldn't have known things about them, even though they've known each other for years. We've engaged them in different activities to tell stories and share, answer silly questions, just kind of icebreaker games and that sort of thing. And it's been a really good way to build community during this time when, as we're in this pause with so many things. I would say that the ministry team I work with, that even though I felt like we were working well as a team before the pandemic, that that the teams become stronger. We're really having to rely on each other more and listen to each other more and learn from each other. I'm learning a lot through the ministers right now, my colleagues and others, in these kind of formats like we're in right now, with other music ministers around the country, particularly in CBF life. And I think it's also allowed opportunities to be more creative and think outside the box, and continue to be in the weeks, months to come. And it's allowed us to showcase certain individual talents. We've had singers come in for the live feed and instrumentalists, and we're distanced, and we're making sure we're doing that as safely as possible. And so Ministry of Music is still working, and in a musically talented church like this, people have been able to really, especially the instrumentalists, be in the forefront when sometimes they're not necessarily the one. So those are some of the opportunities that have just come during this time that that have allowed me to think, well, what else can we do in the months to come?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And Lois, for you all took a very creative step to begin with, and so what have you discovered now when a large portion of that step was actually moving your faith community into this senior adult living facility, and now that particular piece is gone, but what have you discovered that maybe still is good and life-giving?
Well, I think a lot that's good and will hopefully be, places of growth would be our online presence. Like I said, for our worship, we use Facebook Live instead of Zoom. We do that purposely so that we can connect with more people that might not, go into a Zoom call or feel like maybe they're an outsider if they're on a Zoom call. And we've had, people who have been a part of the church before but moved away are now able to participate. New people that are just curious about our type of ministry. So we're hoping that will give us more visibility, because we've been working on visibility and getting things together to teach this model to other churches, especially churches where buildings might be sucking them dry. I have a list of facilities that are asking for churches like Blue Valley to come into their facility. And so we're looking, this is an opportunity to help get that message out and get others that might either want to, work alongside with us or, start a ministry in a facility. And then we're also starting a pen pal program with the residents. And so that will build stronger relationships between the residents and the folks who live outside of the facility, give them some more opportunity to get to know each other. Kind of like what Kyle was saying, we're looking for the opportunities where we do get to know. And at the facility, they just recently, in the past couple of weeks, have what they call patio visits. And so the residents can have a one-on-one visit. You have to make an appointment, you have to mask and social distance, but you can visit for a while. And so I am able to go in and visit. It's only with the independent living right now, not assisted living, because they're a little bit more vulnerable community. But so I've had more opportunities to actually sit down in a face-to-face visit with some of the residents and to get to know each other better. So some of those things have been really good. And I don't have the pressure of some pastors of, do we reopen? What does it look like? You know, because that's dictated by the parent company of where we're at, of when we can be back in the building. And the Facebook Lives are done from my living room. So sometimes that's nice stress not to have to worry about how do we reopen, and when does, you know, we have things in place for what we need to do when we are in the building, but we don't have to decide when that happens. So that's kind of nice.
Yeah, that's great. You guys are bringing back some old school kinds of ministries, pen pals, and you know, probably phone trees, all kinds of things like that.
Yes.
That's tremendous. So now comes the very difficult part. It's kind of the last major question. And if any of the folks listening in have a question they'd like to ask, just a reminder, you can put that in the chat area or kind of do a thumbs up, and I'll see that on your screen. So I'm going to ask you all as panelists to kind of forecast into the future. What kind of effect do you think this period of time will have moving forward for your area of ministry, or even for the church in general? How are we going to be changed because of this? Hannah, what do you think?
So I do think that, just to reiterate, I think this is sort of a Kairos moment. It's a moment where there is a lot of loss and a lot of change, but it's also a time for divine interruption and opportunity. And so I think sitting with that is important. And I think that's probably going to be really unique for each church. I think it does provide churches the opportunity to think about what we can do instead of operating or living in the headspace of like what we can't do. Because I think our tendency is to try to get back to normal. But I think, you know, our leaders here have been talking about what does it look like for us to sit in the space of operating from what we can do, rather than reacting to the limitations of what we can't do. So I just think it's important to sit in that space. I think there's going to be a higher focus on relationship, and particularly, as Kyle already said, how, you know, we're going to be relying on technology as a means of relationship building. And so I think in the church, we haven't had to learn as much about that as maybe some of the rest of the world has, but we can learn a lot from other disciplines about how to build relationships through technology. I think there's going to be a higher focus on end user effectiveness. So is what we are doing effective among the people in the pews? Except we won't be in pews probably. So, you know, is what we are doing in worship and mission and formation actually connecting with people? And is it encouraging them in faith? So I think we're going to have to think about that differently and more intentionally than we have before. And again, I think that's something that churches need to be doing that's just been accelerated by COVID. So I think that in order to be effective, we're probably going to have to offer a broad array of things. And what I'm hearing and what I'm seeing is very much a both and scenario for at least the next 24 months. And I wonder how long that will extend. So both and meaning people are asking for both print and digital resources. People are asking for daily or weekly connection, but they're also interested in more intermittent special event type things. People are going to be interested in both in-person and virtual opportunities. So we'll have to think about that in our different forms of ministry. So in children's ministry, what does being in person look like in small age group gatherings? And then what does it look like to make virtual a possibility throughout the year and be able to pivot to all virtual at any point? I think we also are going to see that parents, they want programming and event opportunities as they traditionally would have at church, like worship, Sunday school, choir, but they also are going to want and need greater resourcing for spiritual formation at home. So I think we're going to be asked for both and in that way. I think we're going to see a rapid increase, I think we're already seeing it, but just a rapid increase in the need for pastoral care resources and to equip and empower people to be aware of their own well-being. I think that's kind of across the spectrum. So how to, just equipping parents for how to understand children's behavior and the messages that how children are eating, how they're sleeping, how they're speaking, how they're behaving, what that tells us about how children are doing. Adults being aware of when it's time to take some Sabbath or to rest. So I think we're going to see a major need and a major interest in people to really take that into their own hands.
Churches will need to be, as they feel a sense that it's okay to not do some things anymore, the whole church community will need to be able to bless their ministers to be able to be doing both and, because it is a significant task to move from doing one thing to doing all things well. Yeah.
And one more thing is I'm finding that, before someone runs a marathon, they do something called tapering, where they rest for 2 weeks and they allow their body to be sort of at optimal performance level when they go and run their marathon. And so one of the things I'm noticing in church is that this is an opportunity and an invitation for us to sort of get some things in order with how we measure engagement, how we connect with folks, how we manage information, just some of those very nuts and bolts things in order to be prepared to connect with people as things ramp back up and, moving into the winter.
Right. Very good. Thank you, Hannah. Kyle, how about you? What do you forecast into the future?
Yeah, I'm going to be careful not to echo some things that Hannah's list is just really good, and there's things that I've written down. That was very good. So what I was thinking about too is that worship, along the lines of both and, that worship, we're really good right now of looking into a camera and doing all the things we have to do through virtual, or we're getting better at it. But when we get back to in person, there's also going to be both and virtual for the next couple of years, that there's going to be a lot of adults who used to consider themselves, they came every Sunday, especially among our older adults, who are going to choose to stay home a lot more. And we're not, even here, we're not even going to go into in-person worship anytime soon. We're doing it carefully through different phases, but definitely not in 2020 are we going to be back to any kind of normal like that. And so people don't have the option, is what I'm saying. But when they do, I don't think they're going to choose to just come back every week. And so I also foresee that older adults are going to, they're going to be, they're not only going to be, they're going to be tempted to stay home more often, but still want to be engaged. And so we're going to have to, they're going to be using virtual the technology more than they ever thought they would. I foresee that small groups are certainly a thing of the future. And we've been talking about in staff today that maybe Sunday school doesn't happen on Sunday anymore, but the groups meet at different times, because now there's the convenience of, well, Sunday morning never really was working. We were, for some of us. And so that's another thing I see coming along the way. I see less emphasis on maybe the building. We've always talked about the church as not the building, but the people. But I see that this is an opportunity for us to really as Hannah says, what can we do we do during this time to really change what we've been needing to change? And COVID's kind of accelerated that for us, and really saying, well, how do we be church in the community? And what does that look like when we can't be gathered in the building safely? And beyond COVID, but beyond this pandemic, what does that look like for us? I was just reading an article that one of the ministers brought to my attention yesterday from the New Yorker called How Pandemics Wreak Havoc and Open Minds. And the Black Plague back in the Middle Ages helped lead to the Renaissance in Europe in the 1300s, mid 1300s. So this is really an opportunity that we should see, as one music minister friend of mine has put it, as a great pause, that we get to actually pause and think about what the future looks like, and look at this as an opportunity to dream new dreams and have new visions and dream together as a church through Zoom meetings and socially distanced gatherings and that sort of thing. Like, look at this as in the positive sense, as the glass is half full kind of thing. I see in the temporary future for music ministry in a practical sense, I'll just say this real quick, that for children, yes, and the parents' families are going to we need to tool them with a hybrid approach of bringing music back into the home. And if they're not, some families are more musical than others. So how do you engage them and give them the tools they need through virtual means, and then doing handbell ensembles safely at the church with masks on and in a larger room with a high ceiling, and separate all the handbell tables so that everyone just has their two bells, and help the children, and make it a game of, you got to keep your mask on and you get a prize at the end, those kind of things. Like, we still need something physically to do, but then maybe that's one Sunday that we're doing that, or Wednesday night, however your church works. And then the next week, it's a virtual thing at home with the families, and you're giving the parents tools too to learn to sing these songs with their children. So there's a wonderful ways to do spiritual formation through music and through other arts, and storytelling, story writing. Everyone, I think, should be writing during this time, and journaling their thoughts. And we're already starting to think about, what does an Advent devotional book look like in this December among our church, and encouraging people to write devotionals, create art, write poems, that sort of thing. So I could go on, but this is really, I just generally want to say, this is an opportunity for us to really, like Hannah had said, what can we do? Not what can't we do, what can we do?
Yeah, great point. Great point. Lois, for you, as you think about ministry with senior adults moving forward, this is perhaps the trickiest of all this, because there's so many unknowns and risks involved. But what do you see as the future?
Well, there is. And I do kind of echo what Hannah and Kyle said, especially the both and it's not going to be the same. And churches are notorious for not wanting to change. But yet, if you want to grow, you want to learn, you want to always be fresh and effective, you got to keep changing. You got to keep innovating. And so this is just a good opportunity to take advantage of that. And as we do that, to see, it's not really a bad thing. We can do this. And then hopefully continue with that as we go on. It is a little tricky, in our situation. And what is that going to look like? We're definitely going to keep our online presence. That's definitely needed. I can see that once we do start up, it probably more than likely is going to be just me, where I go in and do a service for the residents, and then there's still the online presence for the whole church. And then we slowly bring the outside members back in. So just how that is going to look. We're still kind of in that time of pausing and planning on what is that going to look like, and how can we expand some of our activities where the residents can still feel like they're needed and they're useful and they're wanted and they're welcomed. I've had a few say, what can I do right now to help the church? So I like to talk on the phone, so, okay, you can't really do pen pal because it's hard for you to write. You're going to be a phone pal. We just look at those different opportunities. One of the big things we were working on right before this happened was storytelling. As Kyle talked about the journaling, we were looking on matching people up, working with a high school to come help us, and writing down the stories to pass on to their families. And, so we can still do that, but it might look different. Maybe it's through these pen pal letters, hang on to what are they telling you? What's part of their story you can put down? Maybe it's through the phone calls. Be sure you're jotting down notes, that kind of stuff. So the activities that we were going to do for storytelling, that might change. And so we just need to get creative and look at how can we do that so the stories can still be told and can be passed down. There's a lot of stories that residents tell me just in our, what I call hallway conversations. A lot of times through the week, I'm just hanging out in the main area where the big traffic area is, and people sit down and visit. And I might talk to a family member later and they're like, I never heard, mom or dad say that. So there's a lot of stories that they just don't realize maybe or haven't thought about sharing with their family, but in our conversation, something else triggered that story and they told me. So
Yeah.
what a gift to be able to get, especially a lot of families live out of town. And so to be able to have their stories written down is important. So
I hear you also sort of expanding the idea of membership of the church. In some ways, your members, the idea of membership has expanded for your church to include not only people that would name themselves as members, but people who are just part of the ministry that you are, you have invested yourself there. So that's really interesting.
Yeah.
So are there any questions? I don't see any in the chat. I'm not seeing any thumbs pointed up out here. I have some follow-up questions that I can ask, but are there any questions from those of you who have dialed in today that you'd like to ask? Okay, I don't see any hands. So I'm going to ask a follow-up question that I have. I've thought a lot about this, the idea that the pressure that ministers feel. This is not something that you're going to talk about unless I ask, so I'm going to ask. There is pressure many times from church members who want various things. They would like to open up right now, or they'd like your ministry to do something different, or to stop doing something, or to adapt to what they would like to see happen, or they would just like for some important thing to be done, but that's not really the way your ministry might be headed. So that kind of pressure, I think, has increased on ministers during this time because there's so much anxiety in everyone's system. How do you, as ministers, evaluate what's best for your area of ministry? What value do you use? What metric do you use to help you move forward in the best way? There's certainly all kinds of possibilities out in front of you. Some that you need to say no to, some that you need to say yes to. How do you decide what to do? Whoever wants to answer that first can.
Well, for myself, I I don't get much pressure from the members, especially like I said, because we don't have to decide when to reopen. I have more pressure that I probably put on myself. And especially in the beginning, I was more busy than before the shutdown. And so I was a little bit jealous because I also heard, kind of like Hannah did, the loving to be able to just pause and some of the activity stopping and having more time. And I wanted some of that time, and yet I was even more busy trying to keep everybody connected and figure out how do we do this. And I was making more phone calls and writing the cards. And so some of those things that, you know, and even the Bible study, I prepare for a Bible study, but I don't write everything out. I write a few notes and we have our study together. Now I'm, you know, it takes a little bit longer. And so in the beginning, there was a lot of that. Now, a lot of that has eased up. And especially as some of the other members have kind of went through their own shock of what's happening, their own fear, and kind of dealing with it, and okay, and so now how do we do this together? Some of those tasks have been shared. So that pressure has been released some. And I just came to the realization a couple of weeks ago, you know, thinking in my mind, oh, well, when this is over, I'll take my vacation, you know, and I kind of joked around with them, guys, when this is all over, I'm taking 2 months off. That's not going to happen. That's not going to be a possibility. And during this time, we still need to get the vacation in. We still need to take that time for the self-care, or we're not going to make it through. What is it going to look like when we're all together again?
Yeah, that's right. Hannah, you said something along those lines before too. You have any thoughts about the metric or the value that you use to, you know, decide what's best in your ministries?
So early on, Chris Fillingham and I, Chris is the pastor at Dayspring Baptist Church in St. Louis, and we were talking, and he used this phrase, and the phrase was just being able to be present with what is. And so that's become an important phrase in a personal way as I am making decisions or moving forward, is allowing myself to be present with what is. And so I think just being aware of, you know, what is my body and my heart and my mind telling me about how I am doing, but also how others are doing. And just that sort of deep listening has become really important for me. And, you know, being able to hear beyond the words of what people are saying, because most people don't know what they need right now. And so a lot of that, you know, just deep listening and practicing presence and being committed to refusing to rush, that sort of refusing to hurry has been important for me. And I think always, you know, just trying to run things as we started to think about the fall and about the winter, and like, okay, we're getting close to August and aliens have not come and blown up the earth yet. We're still here. So we're kind of thinking about this ministry year ahead of us. And so I've spent a lot of time going back to, you know, what is it that I'm hearing people say is really important to them? And what is it in our church's own sense of identity and in our own sense of values that resonates in this moment? And so, you know, as I'm thinking about children's ministry, I'm thinking through like, okay, so this year, what does it look like for kids to have opportunities to serve and to grow and to play? What is that? That's sort of our missional, you know, our mission statement. That's what we say we want to do. So I think now we're feeling more of that deep breath of like, okay, we're getting ready for August. We can think about things in terms of vision and mission, but also just still trying to be very present to what's happening in body and heart and mind.
Yeah, Very good. Kyle, do you have anything to add to that question of deciding what's best?
Yeah, I think being slow and intentional is talking about that pace thing that Hannah's brought up. I've thought, the first month, most of us were probably like, well, I was naively thinking, well, we'll get to June. I see this lasting for a couple months and 3 months maybe, and then we'll beat this thing. And obviously that's not the case. So now it's been, really having to think about what it is that what's important to us for the long haul now for the next couple of years. Obviously, we're about being faithful disciples of Christ and bringing others into relationship with Christ as disciples and followers. And that looks like, what does that look like right now? But that's certainly a high value for all of us of how do we do that in spiritual formation with those who are already followers and those that we're trying to reach out to in the community. So I think we have to be methodical and about that and not rush to, we don't need to be reacting. We don't need to be reactive right now. And this is not an original idea, and I forget where I read it in the last week, and someone may have read it in this group, I'm trying to remember, but it was an article, and it said, the church doesn't need to be the thermometer, they need to be the thermostat. And I think that's really a good practical, good philosophy, that we need to be, we need to not be so reactive, and we need to remember that we're leaders as ministers, and we're trying to, I think the high value right now is that we're trying to keep everyone safe, obviously, and we don't want to rush back if we know that it's potentially could cause one of the least among us to get sick and die, when we could prevent that, when we know what we know scientifically. And so I think, yeah, that we need to put a high value on that too, and being on science. And that has been the tension we've been living in, right? Among, I know friends in Texas where I used to serve, where, this faith and science tension is, and the politics is just, that all three are just meeting head on right now. So how does the church, how do we react to that right now, or not react in a rushed way, but in a very gracious and Christ-like way?
Yeah, very good. Well, that's a great place to end with those values in our minds. I want to thank you all for not only the folks who joined us, but certainly the panelists, Lois and Kyle and Hannah. Thank you for the way you serve your churches, first of all, but secondly, the way you've shared your insights and expertise with us today. I want to invite everybody to come back and join us again next month on August 19th, where we'll be talking about a global missions forecast and the way this pandemic has affected global missions, and certainly the way churches may engage global missions moving forward. One of our panelists for that event will be Sam Harrell, who is the Associate Coordinator of Global Missions for CBF and was a longtime field personnel in Kenya. So anyway, look forward to having you. Watch for the video of this, the recording of this coming up soon, I hope, on all those channels, Facebook and our Vimeo and our YouTube and our website. So thank you all for being with us today, and God bless the rest of your day.